Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Jenkins, the publisher of SCBiz News, the media company serving about 100,000 business executives throughout South Carolina. Here in the upstate, you know us as GSA Business Report. Welcome to SCBIZtv and another episode in our ongoing video series, Nonprofit Spotlight. Today, we're turning the spotlight on Family Promise of Laurens County. Family Promise coordinates with community churches and other organizations to support families in need, specifically families with children who are homeless. Here to tell us all about it is that organization's executive director, Mary-Lynn Tollison. Mary-Lynn, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Well, you're very welcome. It is good to have you here. And I tell you what, you do really important work, and I am honored to have you sitting here in our studio today.
Thank you so much.
You know what, the Laurens County chapter has been, it's fairly new, right? I mean, it started, February of 20?
It did indeed. And we opened our doors in February, and in March, COVID hit. So in the first 2 years of operation, we certainly have struggled with that barrier.
Right, I understand. And you have not been with the organization too long yourself. We're talking, December?
Mid-December.
Yeah, and you came in and hit the ground running, and I'm assuming it has been a whirlwind.
It has been wonderful. And tomorrow, I actually celebrate my 100th day on the job.
100 days. Good for you. I'm sure the folks of Laurens County are glad to have you there. And as a matter of fact, you are from Laurens County. Is that correct? Born and raised?
Born and raised, and have been away and returned to retire.
Back home.
Back home,
well,
indeed.
I'm sure they're glad to have you there. Let's talk about Family Promise. Now, when families come to you, they are in some need, some degree of crisis, right?
Correct.
They may be ready. They may be on the doorstep of losing their home, unfortunately, or they may have already lost their home. And they come to you. And so we're talking about families, we're talking about moms, dads, and children that need shelter, that need a roof over their head. And we're going to talk about how that all works here in just a second. However, I know your faith is important to you. Do you feel like this is a calling of sorts?
I do indeed. I spent many years in state government and trying to blend together assisting other people along with my faith in Jesus Christ has always been a struggle. You know, how do you balance those two? With Family Promise, it hasn't been a struggle at all. Being able to help people utilizing a faith-based ministry where faith communities are involved is key.
Let's talk about the 3 ways that Family Promise can help folks who are in this kind of dire straits. One of those is prevention services. And this is where you help folks that have not lost their home, but they very well might. Tell us about that.
Well, that's for families who come into our center and say, Miss Mary-Lynn, I am 3 months away from losing our home, or maybe we're 2 months past due on our balance and we're afraid that we're going to be evicted. So is there any way you could assist us? So we go into full force in helping those families to maintain where they're living, because if they're happy and in stable environments, that's our ultimate goal, to have families in stable homes. And so we want to have them in a stable environment. So we help to provide any kind of resources that they might need in order to stay there. So the goal of prevention is to prevent them from being homeless to begin with.
That's right. And how do these folks find out about Family Promise?
In many cases, they're referred by local churches. Maybe a family went by and stopped at a church and asked for assistance, and that family either called Family Promise or asked them to come to our center. Right. In other cases, there's other social service organizations who've referred families because they've gone to those organizations for assistance. Collaboration is important for us all to work together and to make the necessary referrals.
You know, you brought up churches, and let's face it, you could not do what you do without the faith community. You have, if I remember correctly, about 30 churches that assist with the second type of need with families, and that is the ones who have unfortunately lost their home. And you couldn't help those folks without these churches. Tell us how it works.
Okay. It's important that churches be involved because the churches are actually the shelter. We don't actually run a building that's a shelter. The churches provide the shelter. So a family comes in and they don't have a place to stay that evening. We do some extensive assessment paperwork on these clients to begin with. And once they come in and we verify that they are indeed in the situation, then we place them in our center. So during the day, they are at what we call our day center, Family Promise Day Center, which is located on Church Street in Laurens. And in the evening, at supper time, they actually go to individual churches. So one particular week, a church might host a family for 7 days. They provide them supper each evening. They then provide them a Sunday school space or another room for families to have an individual room for their family.
You bring beds in.
Bring the beds in, and they stay there from Sunday to Saturday night.
Right.
And they spend the night in fellowship and participate in churches' activities if they wish, but if they don't, they're just there for shelter.
Right.
Then the next morning, we pick them up, bring them back to the center where they're working on getting job placement. The children are in school. The bus picks them up at the center. And you know, the best thing about our day center and about our church engagement is that churches are really involved in getting to know those families.
Right.
And they provide a lot of support that we don't provide in evening hours when they're just sitting around talking.
That's right.
And engaging.
That's right. And if I remember, we talked a little bit before we went on air, and you said that churches will house them for 7 days. Now, at that point, it doesn't mean that those families are without shelter. It just means they rotate to another church.
They rotate to another church.
Right.
And so we just go from one church to another. And sometimes after a family's been with us for several weeks, they might be anxious about going to another church or going to another place. And so we do have a static site. We haven't talked about that, but we do have a static site that once they're weary from traveling church to church, we can place them in a home that's been given to us by a local church.
Right. Sounds like you've got plenty of alternatives.
We do.
The third way that you help families who are in need is through sustainability. And so once they come to you, once they take advantage of the situation where they have churches to stay at and you find them a place to live and they go off on their own, it's not over at that point, is it?
It's not, because from the day you walk in our center, we follow you up to a year. Yeah. And sometimes longer, but in many cases up to a year. It's important that we engage families in learning how to budget, how to properly spend some of their money, and to make sure that they're not only just in a house, but they're sustaining and managing that household. They're managing the expenses of the household. They're managing dealing with their children's needs. And if they ever find themselves in need of anything within that year's time, they know they can always turn to Family Promise and some of our faith communities.
Right. Now, even though the churches do a great service to you, and you could not do it, as I said, without your faith community, you also need cash, right? You need funding. You need to be able to support these folks as they are in the churches. How do you get that funding?
Well, in many ways, we write grants. We've just been a recipient of a COVID grant. We're excited about that. The churches actually pledge donations. So individual churches, as part of their involvement, engagement, they pledge money. We have a 270 club. And as part of that 270 Club, we have individuals that support us. We've had several local foundations who've provided us money. We do fundraisers from time to time to raise money. So we use every method we can in order to get those resources.
You have to. The 270 Club, now the 270 stands for something. Tell me what that is.
Right.
That's how much money it takes to support
a family for a few days in our center.
That's right.
And so you're just investing and saying, I'd be glad to pay for 24 hours or 48 hours stay for a family.
Right. And not only do you need cash to help make things run, you need volunteers. And from what I understand, you got a whole lot of them.
We do. And we look and follow some of our volunteer hours, and we range anywhere from 200, 250, 300 hours a month in volunteer services. And those are people that transport our families from the church there, who do construction when something goes wrong in an apartment complex or something goes wrong in one of our facilities. They step ahead. They help us set up the beds when we're moving from church to church.
Right.
And so it involves everyone. Everybody has to be involved.
Yes.
It takes a village.
You're exactly right. And I tell you what, it's a great village that you have put together. Folks, that is Mary-Lynn Tollison, and she is the executive director at Family Promise, the chapter in Lawrence County. It has been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I enjoyed this conversation, and I'm touched by what you all do and by what you do individually within your job. So again, thank you. Folks, again, Mary-Lynn Tollison, thank you for joining us on another episode of Nonprofit Spotlight. Stick around on SCBIZtv and see if there's anything else you might like to catch, and we will see you next time.